So I saw that they recently announced Horizon Hunter's Gathering, a PvE hero shooter set in the universe of Horizon Zero Dawn. I watched the trailer for it, and it immediately made me think about that tribal futuristic setting that's been beaten to death at this point because so many games are doing it. You know what I'm talking about. Ugly-ass cavemen character designs who congregate in crude huts and wear leaf skirts and wrap everything in sports tape for some reason. Contrast that with robotic animal enemies that shoot lasers, often originating from a super technologically advanced civilization that grew too big and destroyed itself, or something equally as cliche.
All across the land, people are dying.
And of course, you can't forget that corporate-approved 1980s purple and blue neon aesthetic. I actually made a video about this already back when Fantasy Life I came out because I was definitely disappointed by the tribal aesthetic they chose over the traditional fantasy setting of the 3DS game. Like, how weird is it that you can be a regular wizard or a paladin, but everyone around you carries sticks and fights in loincloths, and the only form of magic shown is voodoo shaman shit. And this was no doubt done because companies realized it was trendy after Breath of the Wild and Horizon did it. I swear, they only do this shit to games to justify slot mechanics like crafting, climbing Ubisoft towers and mountains that take an ungodly amount of time to do, and parachute gliding around a vast, sprawling landscape with nothing in it. And yeah, the Hunter's Gathering game isn't a new IP or anything, but is set in the Horizon universe, which I talked about that game in the video. Horizon Zero Dawn is without a doubt the earliest and most obvious example of this aesthetic. But I figured it would be a good excuse to talk about this phenomenon again, mostly because that last video was unscripted and I forgot a lot of the games that fall under this category of Wakanda core, as I like to call it, that were actually pretty recent releases back when I made the video. I think the biggest one I left out was the new Prince of Persia game, you know, the one where you don't play as the prince and instead play as this "We was Kane's black dude." Seriously, absolutely awful design for your MC, complete with a Killmonger haircut. Although I will say, the gameplay didn't look bad when the trailer first dropped, and I heard it did end up being a pretty decent game. The only thing stopping me from playing it is the annoying Ubisoft launcher. With the aesthetics, you could definitely tell they were trying to be different by modernizing the art style and presenting it like it's a Marvel movie, but it just looks weird with how it clashes with the historical setting of Arabia. That's one thing that annoys me about this, is that they try to be faithful to a time period or culture, but ruin it with globo-homo shit because these fucks just can't help themselves, while at the same time crying about cultural appropriation. Just look at the casting for any period piece made in the last 5 years. They made the safest design choices imaginable with rap music, '80s aesthetic for the logo. I mean, it looks exactly like Cyberpunk 2077. And lightning bolts, and again, the Killmonger haircut. I'm so sick and tired of seeing this shitty haircut, dude. And then you had the Dawn Trail expansion of FF14. After having just left off from going to the fucking moon as the finale for its first storyline, they said, hey, let's have a beach trip arc. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy to follow up something like that, but this was not a strong start. They also shoved an incredibly obnoxious character in your face, Wook Lamont, who is one of the most forced companions in a video game I've ever seen. It's literally Poochie, dude.
2. Whenever Poochie's not on screen, all the other characters should be asking, where's Poochie?
She's forced onto you in every cutscene, and the plot only progresses when she's there. And the English voice actor is trans, so they were probably hoping for some diversity points there because they wanted you to like this character so badly. It wouldn't be so bad if the voice acting was actually good, but it's fucking abysmal, and the accent is beyond cringe.
Has she lost control of the power? Sting! Listen to me!
What even were the credentials other than being trans and like a quarter Hispanic? And yes, they actually do think that qualifies them to voice this character, despite a million of these facts crying about white people voicing minority characters and shit, and how the characters need to be voiced by people who match their race or whatever the fuck. And why do we always have to play as the jungle-dwelling spear throwers instead of the cool techno empire? That's the biggest problem with Wakanda Core. Aside from being creatively bankrupt, the juxtaposition strips you of any feeling of a power fantasy, because they never make it cool. They just make your side the people who fight with twigs while the bad guys get mechs and robot dogs. Or if you do get the cool futuristic shit, they still have you foraging for berries and setting snares. Like, I have lasers and robots, why can't I just kill everything in sight? It plays very heavily to the idea of living in harmony with nature rather than man conquering it. Why would you want to play as the side that eats the bugs instead of the badasses who bend everything to their will? It feels almost cynical and anti-human in a way, and it's no doubt intentional. Modern game devs associate cold machinery, uniformity, organized and homogeneous civilization, and large-scale industrialism with the forces of fascism and capitalism that only know overconsumption and oppression. So of course the good guys have to be living in trees and eating the bugs and living in your pods and can't progress as a species so as to exploit the wilderness that birthed them and gave them freedom from the institutions of oppression. Add the diverse ugliness of DEI character designs into the mix, and you have the perfect representation of what these subhumans value and believe to be good. An Ouroboros that sacrifices its own history and desire for self-preservation to appeal to a misguided abstraction of virtue, while celebrating meekness and displays of obscene narcissism. Which is funny because I thought Reddit atheists loved the idea of transhumanism. You know, fusing man and machine into one to conquer the natural limitations of the flesh. Monster Hunter is actually a good example of this aesthetic done right, in a way. It always leaned into the tribal aesthetic, don't get me wrong, and it definitely is over the top, but the aesthetic actually looks cool, and it still manages to nail the gameplay while making you feel small compared to what you're up against in the environment around you. Your obstacle is nature, basically, and you get stronger by fashioning weapons and armor off the monsters you hunt. The monsters are big and threatening, but you actually have gear to match them. I mean, your sword is bigger than you are and is an actual sword and not some stick you sharpened with a knife. It works aesthetically because you're confronting nature and not surrendering to it, and the gameplay reflects this too by giving you the tools for size. In these other examples, the technology doesn't even add much, except for when they want to show you how cool science is. I mean, if your team has all the cool technology and tools of destruction, it would make you the colonizer and the analog these writers operate under. That would be bad, dude. You're not supposed to idolize the evil fascist empire like that. Like how Wakanda has all this technology, but you know, we can't give it to other nations to help them because they would just use it to colonize smaller nations. Also, revenge bad, and if you kill your enemies, you're no better than they are, chud. No. Here, they use science to cure cancer and provide universal healthcare or some lame shit like that. And yeah, you do gather materials and craft armor and weapons, but part of the appeal of Monster Hunter is incorporating the monster designs and motifs into your armor by using the monster parts and wearing them. That's way better than having to take note of every piece of foliage you come across because it might be useful to craft something later and just stays in your inventory for 10 hours until you need it. It makes me think of Minecraft and how there are now like 10 different versions of the same block. It's not immersive, it doesn't add anything to the gameplay, it's just tedious padding. Now we get into some newly announced hot and ready Wakandaslop. First we got Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, a sequel to Three Houses, and oh boy, I really do not like the way this trailer looked. So the game takes place in a coastal setting inspired by ancient Rome, and this dude looks just like the guy from Fantasy Life I. The main character is also another brown kid with the Killmonger dreads. What the fuck, dude? And there's guns now, like magic guns. Honestly, this one really only fits because of the awful main character design. I mean, goddamn, that's horrible. But other visual elements definitely give off the aesthetic as well. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it feels like we're seeing a push for more deserts and ocean. This game gives off some Middle Eastern vibes too. Even Dragon's Dogma 2 had those Khajiit ripoffs who live in desert regions, and the Sphinx, now that I think about it. Maybe they'll replace Ubisoft towers and Fortnite gliders with seafaring and boat exploration like Wind Waker or some shit. This next one is an older game that released years ago, but Biomutant also has that tribal look to it that was definitely in style back when it came out in 2021. Developed by THQ Nordic, Biomutant is another game set in a post-apocalyptic open world where you play as your own customizable bioengineered fur baby rocket raccoon lookalike and explore lush environments and overgrown ruins to save the Tree of Life while doing missions for the various factions that each have a vested interest in this tree. It definitely is one of those games you'd see during the lockdowns when all of the normies wanted to touch grass, but through their video game, that emphasized the wilderness and nature, much like Animal Crossing New Horizons, whose sales were pretty much carried by COVID and everyone being stuck at home with nothing better to do. I don't know, Biomutant always sort of stuck with me when it came out, and I've always thought about it. The presentation is kind of weird because the animals look sort of realistic looking, and the environments are very colorful and ambient. But then you have annoying comic book onomatopoeia pop in when you hit an enemy or shoot your gun, and it just clashes so badly. And looking at the menus in this game, you'd easily mistake it for Fortnite. It feels like they couldn't decide if they wanted this game to be realistic looking post-apocalyptic grunge, or be a cartoon game for kids. Something kind of like Kena Bridge of Spirits, which, oh look, also released the same year. And yeah, that was another comfy COVID-era nature game. And it actually got a sequel announced at the last State of Play a couple weeks ago by the time of this recording. Sony also had a recent lawsuit with Tencent over a Chinese Horizon clone called Light of Motorum that was cancelled and delisted from Steam and Epic Games Store. And yeah, it looks just like Horizon Zero Dawn, except you'll notice that the humans aren't fetal alcohol syndrome goblins or Pixar cartoons. I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan of the porcelain doll look either, but it is undeniable that the East has the West beat in that department by virtue of not pandering to Western sensibilities with ugly art styles. Speaking of ugly art styles, you probably noticed this ham beast in the trailer footage I've been showing for Hunter's Gathering. Ah yes, a prime BBW muscle mommy for all the cells out there. You know who you are. Literal Concord tier design, man. People talk about wanting to return to that nostalgic Y2K tropical look games like Super Mario Sunshine and Sonic Adventure had. But to me it feels like it never left in a way. Or at least we're stuck with a gay, pseudo-futuristic iteration of it instead. Anyway, that's all I got for today. Goodbye.